Earlier today, President Biden announced the U.S. will send $100 million in humanitarian aid to Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, even as more than 100 hostages, including American citizens, are being held captive by Hamas in Gaza. The president claims that the aid will be directed towards civilians only and will cease if it is diverted by Hamas. Now, these people have shown absolutely no regard for human life. Can we really trust that this will go to the civilians that Israel is encouraging to leave? Joining me now to discuss this and much more, Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri. He serves on 4 Senate committees, including the Senate Homeland Security Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee. He joins us by phone. Senator, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
So, Senator, I want to start first with your reaction to President Biden's aid package to the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank.
Well, I think it's a mistake because I can't understand how he's going to ensure that that money, Tony, along with anything else, any tangible goods, won't immediately go to the combatants. Listen, this is the same administration that has been giving hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money to the Palestinian leadership for the last 3 years. And look how that has worked out. This is a deeply corrupt Palestinian leadership there in Gaza. I don't trust them at all. And I haven't heard a word from the administration about how they're going to ensure that this money actually goes to people in need and not to terrorists.
Part of the concern, and I think that Israel has pressed this case, that the supplies going in will be checked to make sure it is, in fact, humanitarian supplies. But no mention of Hamas releasing the hostages that they're holding. Why? If you want to help your people out, help our people out. Let them go.
Well, that absolutely should be a condition that includes, as you pointed out, multiple Americans who are being held hostage. And I just think that, listen, it is very unwise, and it adds to the numerous idiocies, frankly, that this administration has pursued by helping these terrorists. And I'm thinking in particular of the $6 billion to Iran. That turns out, Tony, to be one of the most idiotic decisions by an American president in recent memory. And this guy has a lot of those. We could talk about the chaos in Afghanistan and just go down the list, but $6 billion made available to Iran at exactly the time that Hamas was planning this terrorist attack on Israel and this hostage taking. Multiple Americans have died now. I think it's 31 Americans have been killed, including from my home state of Missouri. I just think the Biden administration's policy has been a disaster, a total disaster, and I don't trust them to do the right thing here.
I don't think I had the clip. I played it yesterday, but this past weekend here in Washington, President Biden was speaking at the HRC's annual dinner. That's the largest LGBTQ advocacy group in America. And he was boasting about how his foreign policy, one of the top priorities was promoting the LGBTQ agenda. And you look at the world, it looks like it's spinning out of control. When America focuses on the wrong things and leads in the wrong way, the rest of the world suffers.
Yeah, that says everything. I'm sure the president was telling the truth about that, Tony. The truth is he is focused on trying to get biological men into women's bathrooms and into women's locker rooms and playing women's sports all around the world, not just in America, but that's his priority, not keeping America safe. And now we are paying the price for that.
Speaking of that LGBTQ agenda, I want to go to that for a moment because I think it was yesterday, you had an exchange with the NCAA president, Charlie Baker, at a Senate Judiciary Committee. He tiptoed around the NCAA policies for men competing with women or changing in women's locker rooms. This is the governing body of collegiate sports. Don't they have some kind of priority? Isn't there some kind of a focus on protecting women?
Well, first of all, it's the NCAA who forced women, including Riley Gaines, at the national championship for swimming, forced the women to have men in their locker room to change in front of the men, in this case, a man, Leah Thomas, And yet the NCAA has not apologized. They didn't ask for their consent, Tony, by the way. They didn't even inform the women. They just said, oh, here, you have to accept this. You have to change in front of this biological male. And now the NCAA president won't meet with Riley Gaines, won't even respond to her letter, won't issue an apology. So I want to know, what is the NCAA's policy now? Are they still forcing women in whatever sport to have men in their locker rooms, let alone playing their sports? I couldn't get a straight answer, but we're going to try again. I wrote today to the NCAA president. I said, here's your chance to level with us and tell us the facts. Are you still forcing these women to accept, female athletes to accept men in their locker rooms? It's outrageous.
I watched the hearing, and in fact, I have a clip of it, and quite frankly, I just could not, I couldn't figure out what he was saying. I'm going to play clip number 11.
I'm not going to defend what happened in 2022. I wasn't there. I was still governor of the Commonwealth. What I will say is we have very specific rules and standards around the safety and security of all our student athletes, and anyone who hosts one of our national championships has to accept that they know what they are and then abide by them accordingly.
But and does that include female athletes having to share locker rooms with biological males, not being warned or consent? Are they asked for their consent?
I don't believe that. I don't believe that policy would be the policy we would use today.
So, Senator, what was he saying?
I have no idea what he's saying. I couldn't tell then. I can't tell now. My guess is he doesn't know what he's saying. He's just waving his hand to try to change the subject. But really, I mean, these universities deserve an answer. The athletes who make so much money for the NCAA deserve an answer. Parents deserve an answer, Tony, and I'm going to get one.
Speaking of college campuses, we've seen this connection. It's very concerning. A lot of Americans are concerned. These terrorist attacks, October the 7th, on our ally Israel. And now we have student groups here in the United States that are celebrating Hamas, attacking Israel, anti-Semitic groups all across America on college campuses. Now, you've actually introduced a resolution that speaks to this.
What it says is that the Senate condemns this anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, pro-jihadist rhetoric that is coming from all of these student groups on American campuses. And I can't believe, Tony, that American university leaders won't step up and condemn this. We need to speak with moral clarity. What is happening to Israel is evil.
Are you concerned that there are some direct connections between these groups on college campuses and terrorist groups like Hamas?
I sure am, and that's why I've asked the Department of Justice to investigate the money. Where is the funding for these so-called student groups coming from? Is it coming from terrorist groups, or are these student groups collecting money and sending it to terrorist groups? That's illegal. I think we deserve to know, given the extraordinary pro-violence, pro-genocide rhetoric that is coming out of these groups on these campuses.
What's the relationship here, do you think, to the southern border, the porous border, where we have literally millions coming across, over 1.5 million, almost 2 million gotaways, who are not wanting to get caught, not wanting to turn themselves in, but rather wanting to get into the country undetected? We know that there are terrorists that are coming across that border. Is there a soft invasion underway in America?
There is an absolute security threat of the first order to Americans on that southern border. And with this environment now, with the terrorism going on in the Middle East, with the kind of terrorist rhetoric that we're seeing in our own soil, on our own campuses, the idea that our southern border is totally open, that you have people already, Tony, record high numbers of people who have links to the terrorist database have crossed over the border, and those are the ones we know about. Just think about the number who've gotten away. So it is a huge security threat. We have got to shut down that border. We've got to secure it, and we've just got to start sending people home. The idea that we'd let these folks into this country and just hope for the best is crazy, and it is dangerous.
So is there given what's happened with Israel. In Israel, for the most part, there is still bipartisan support in defending Israel. I had Chris Mitchell on the program, top of the hour, live from Jerusalem, and he talked about Israel seems to have a stopwatch, and it's true. There's global sympathy for a while for Israel, but it runs out, and that bipartisan support at some point runs out. But is there an understanding that what happened in Israel could happen here because of that porous border, because of the failed immigration policy that we have under the Biden administration? So is there a renewed sense across the aisle that we need to address national security?
Oh, I'm afraid not. No, I don't think there is a sense across the aisle, and I think the Biden administration wants to deny the reality, which is that they have opened the border. This isn't some random act, a natural disaster. No, they have done it by their policies. They've opened that border up to terrorists. They've opened the border up to members of the Chinese Communist Party who've also crossed. They've opened it up to drug runners, human traffickers, child traffickers. And all of these people are entering our country, building networks in our country. Tony, it is an incredible security threat and also a moral travesty what is happening on our border, and the fact the Biden administration is carrying it out. I emphasize these are their policies to change, and this is something Republicans in Congress have to insist that we're not going to keep funding this clear and present danger on the border.
Yeah, I was very disappointed in the last funding mechanism. Originally, there had been a proposal in the House that would have addressed the border as well as reduced spending, and that didn't make it. Hopefully, this next time around, it will. Senator Josh Hawley, before we wrap up here and let you go, I mean, we've talked about a lot of heavy things today, and the world is really reeling from lack of leadership, and a lot of that points back to the United States. But as believers, the Scripture tells us we're to be anxious for nothing, but by prayer with supplication, with thanksgiving, let our requests be made known unto God. As you sit right here in our nation's capital, you're a part of these discussions. You know what the nation is facing. You know what is happening in the world. What would you share with our viewers and listeners, believers across this country, about the significance of this moment and what we should be doing?
Well, we're instructed as believers to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And I think that, Tony, that means to pray for the security, to pray for the prosperity. Of course, we always want to pray as believers for the safety of the gospel and the ability of people to respond to God's call on their life through freedom of worship all over the world, not just in our own country. So I think the current crisis in the Middle East, I think, should bring home to us the significance of the hour that we live in. We really do live in an inflection point moment in history. And that's really something to be thankful for, in the sense that the Lord has entrusted us with this in this hour, and He has asked us to stand strong for Him in this hour, no matter what the cost is, and to witness boldly for Him and to the truth that is in Him and in Jesus Christ. And so I just think that it's our privilege to do that. And now it's our privilege to stand with our Israeli brothers and sisters, our Jewish brothers and sisters, to pray for them, to support them, to speak for religious liberty all across this country and the world, and to continue to say that in the face of danger, we have hope and confidence because we know how the story ends, and so we are not afraid.
That's right. And we must have the confidence and the peace of mind and of heart in this moment so that we can share the way with others. Senator Josh Hawley, always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.